Well, last week was the 2024 U.S. elections, and it appears that America overwhelmingly chose fascism. I do touch on politics often on this channel, but it's usually with a fairly straightforward correction of misinformation or some tie to scientific research. But this video is going to be a little different. Before I go back to making my usual videos, I just need to sit down with you guys and get this off my chest. So this video is going to be much more opinion than science. I do think my opinion is based on hard evidence, but everybody thinks that. So whatever, let's just get into it. Now, returning viewers probably already figured out my opinions prior to this, but I'm just going to lay out what I think of everything that's been going on for the past year. As a progressive, I had really hoped that Joe Biden would keep his promise from 2020 when he said that he was going to be a one-term president. I hoped that he would guide us through the pandemic and then hand over the reins to someone who is more progressive. I was glad when he finally did step down because his public decline was horrifying, but I knew at that point the only person who could run was Kamala Harris, who is too conservative for my tastes, and I knew that she would also face some ugly misogynistic and racist attacks. I was momentarily relieved when she chose a relatively progressive running mate, but within weeks, I was no longer seeing Tim Walz on TV talking about feeding hungry children or making fun of how weird Republicans are. Instead, Harris chose to spend all of October campaigning with Liz Cheney, a woman who Donald Trump rightly pointed out is a neoconservative warmongering monster. And it was honestly really difficult to watch liberals claim that Trump was calling for Cheney to be put in front of a firing squad. No, he was making the same argument that we made back in the early 2000s. The Republicans who marched us into war with Iraq and Afghanistan would never do that if they were forced to go on the front lines themselves or to send their children. And then Harris continued to punt on the issue of the Israeli genocide, which I understood as a political tactic, but I was disappointed as someone who dislikes genocides. And when you combine that with the fact that she's now campaigning with Bush-era warmongering Republicans, I did start to get an uneasy feeling. Because I was here in 2016. The Democrats had no success pushing to the right with Hillary Clinton, but I still hoped that a majority of voters would understand the threat that Donald Trump posed to our very democracy and vote accordingly. With Harris, it's pretty clear we had an opportunity to lobby, to push her administration left. But, Trump has been open about his plans. Project 2025 has been published in full. He admitted he would dissolve, defund, defang institutions that make life better for all Americans, like the Department of Education and the Environmental Protection Agency. He said he was going to further restrict women's bodily autonomy. He said he would deport millions of immigrants, documented or otherwise, and strip others of their citizenship. He would appoint more right-wing Supreme Court justices, meaning decades more of this conservative stranglehold. And he'll do everything in his power to remain president as long as possible. We know that. It's not an open question. He already did an insurrection. There's no reason to assume that he's going to give up power in 4 years, assuming he's still alive. And that he hasn't just handed over the autocratic reins to his younger, more weaselly running mate. I hoped that a majority of Americans would reject all that. I expected that a majority of Americans would reject all that, and I was wrong. I, like the Republican Party, assumed that Trump's policies, the policies of the religious right, were unpopular, and that since they were made plain, people would reject them. I was wrong. I assumed that if Trump won, it would be because of gerrymandering or because of the Electoral College. I was wrong. He won the popular vote. Donald Trump won this election because the majority of American adults, including women, do not think women's lives matter enough. The majority of American adults, including Latino men, do not think immigrants' lives matter enough. The majority of American adults do not think LGBTQ plus lives matter enough. The majority of American adults do not think our democracy matters enough. The only gender or racial categories to vote to save us, to save our democracy, were Black men and Black women, and the rest of us failed them. So while I do think that the Democrats made some horrible decisions during this campaign, and while I also think that the mainstream media did too much to cover for Trump, and I think there were damaging disinformation campaigns that fooled a lot of people, I also have to accept that this election was a sad indictment on the current state of America's values. The majority of Americans are obviously deeply misinformed and bigoted to a point where they have voted against themselves. And make no mistake, with the cuts to education and consumer protections, plus the looming price increases that will likely come from deporting so many workers and taxpayers without even considering Trump's proposed tariffs, they voted to make themselves stupider and more prone to misinformation. And we're going to have to contend with that if we're going to move forward. I try to make sure all of my beliefs are based on strong evidence, but there is one belief I hold on to at all costs in the face of all contrary data. I believe that humanity is essentially good. I believe that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice, as Martin Luther King Jr. once said. Progress is not a straight line, but when we look back, we should be able to say, yeah, humanity is better in these concrete ways compared to 100, 400, 1,000 years ago. And so we pick ourselves back up and we move forward. So what does that look like, moving forward? For me, my focus in 2025 is going to be community. One of the first things I did on Wednesday morning after the election was check in with my neighbors. We're pretty tight-knit, and it felt good to connect and to confirm that we all still had each other's backs. It was grounding. It made me feel a little bit better. And so as I thought how I want to move forward, I decided that I wanted to extend that feeling to you, to spread that feeling to other people. Back in August, I talked about how workers at the EPA were preparing for the possibility of another Trump presidency. To recap, Trump's Project 2025 includes plans to fire a bunch more scientists. He already cleared house in 2016, but many more, and other skilled government employees, and replace them with Trump's lackeys. Every new administration has certain roles that it fills with new people, but in the past, most positions in the government continue on through new administrations because they aren't overtly political, and they need to be done by someone with experience. And that's going away. But this past summer, the EPA employees managed to secure a 4-year contract that requires an independent audit before any of them can be fired for suspected politically motivated reasons. They secured that protection thanks to the fact that they are unionized. Unions protect workers from companies and institutions that will happily exploit them. The Biden administration was more pro-union than any other in my lifetime, which led to workers securing wins across the country in various industries. Many workers at places like Amazon, Apple, Trader Joe's, Chipotle voted to unionize their workplaces. Unions get those workers higher pay, more flexible work hours, better healthcare benefits, and more, all thanks to collective action. For instance, in 2022, rail workers got a 7% raise with another 8.5% over the next 2 years, plus cash bonuses every year. And food service workers at SFO got a 30% raise. Despite the Democrats protecting and strengthening unions, the Teamsters and firefighter unions did not endorse Kamala Harris, and many of their members ended up voting for Donald Trump, who experts say will try to destroy protections that Biden secured. But the experts also say that Trump will not be able to destroy the unions themselves. A big part of what's been going on is a demonstration effect, that this is something you can do and that is independent of the legal environment, said Barry Eidlin, a sociologist who studies labor at McGill University in Montreal. And once they do organize, there are ways to secure success despite that lack of legal protections. For example, Noam Scheiber writes in the New York Times, graduate students at private universities who have been unionizing in large numbers over the past few years might stop filing paperwork to hold union elections under Mr. Trump. They could fear that his labor board would rule that they lacked a federally protected right to unionize as previous Republican labor boards did. Instead, they might seek voluntary recognition from their universities, then protest and perhaps even strike until the universities grant it. There are a lot more people who are going to be saying, "What do you mean you're trying to prevent me from having a union?" Dr. Eidlin said. Something similar could happen at companies, said Michael Latito of Littler Mendelson, an expert on labor relations. He said that unions often pivoted to targeting a company's reputation when the legal landscape became less favorable, and that these campaigns could be effective. So if you are not currently in a union, please consider talking to your coworkers about organizing. The increase in wages that will result could help you in the coming years. But collective action is about more than just getting a fair shake at work. It's also about agitating for your human rights. I'm currently reading Why Civil Resistance Works, The Strategic Logic of Nonviolent Conflict by Professor Erica Chenoweth, director of Harvard's Nonviolent Action Lab, and Maria J. Stephen, chief organizer and co-lead of the Horizons Project. If you want an overview of some of their findings, you can check out this excellent New Yorker article from 2020, but the spoiler alert is in the title. Nonviolent Civil Resistance Works. That's right, I lied. This video is going to tie into important scientific research. I can't help it. Chenoweth and Stephen examined major revolutions from around the world from 1900 to the current day, in which a group of at least 1,000 people were attempting to overthrow a government in power or otherwise liberate their region. Despite a very restrictive criteria for inclusion that actually excluded successes like the U.S. Civil Rights Movement and Gandhi's struggle for Indian independence, they still found that nonviolent resistance succeeded more often than it failed, and violent resistance failed more often than it succeeded. Further, nonviolent resistance was more likely to lead to a more egalitarian government left in charge. They also identified the markers of a movement that will likely succeed, like engaging at least 3.5% of the population in the cause. Most, though not all, historical movements that reached that tipping point were successful. Just 3.5% of the population, that's all you need. Successful campaigns also employed a diversity of strategy, not just marching in the streets, but weird and wild techniques like when dissidents in West Sahara, a region occupied by Morocco, responded to a law against flying their flag by attaching the flags to the tails of the area's feral cats, forcing the authorities to either accept the flags being flown or look idiotic chasing down a bunch of street cats. Chenoweth notes that it seems like all revolutions are becoming a little less successful over time, and posits that this might be because authoritarian governments are learning how to counter common tactics. So with that in mind, getting more creative is probably going to become more important in the future. The researchers also found that successful campaigns were more likely to be diverse, not just in their tactics, but in their ranks, in that a wide variety of people, from children to the elderly, feel that they can contribute meaningfully to the revolution. And that's where I want to pivot a bit and point out that when I say the answer is collective action, I'm not just talking about a union at work, and I'm not even talking about big political revolutions. I'm talking about you going next door to your neighbor's place, ringing the doorbell, and introducing yourself. Because I know not everybody is as lucky as me to have awesome neighbors, but I guarantee that there are awesome people nearby. 72 million people voted against fascism in this election. I guarantee that one of them is probably one of your neighbors. You should go find them. And hey, if it's not one of your neighbors, well, I bet it's somebody at the local game store that does Magic the Gathering tournaments, or somebody at the book club that meets up at the library each month, or somebody in the local bike party, somebody at the animal shelter, somebody in the running club, somebody in a Stitch and Bitch club. Do they still do those? They're out there. Find them and join together with them. I've seen a lot of leftists talking about going out and buying a handgun because They think that that's the way to protect their personal safety, and also because that's what the revolution is. And I'm here to tell you that it isn't. The Nazis see revolution as inherently violent, and now they have control of the state's ability to do violence. So honestly, they are hoping that you are violent because then they can react with more violence. They control the police now. They control the government. The revolution is not you picking up a handgun and then being lost to senseless gun violence. The revolution is you meeting up with another progressive in real life and teaming up. The revolution isn't storming the Capitol on January 6th to stop Trump from taking office. Instead, it's you joining your local Democratic Socialists of America chapter. It's you volunteering someplace to help others. It's you building up your skills. It's you figuring out creative ways to completely fuck up the system until we get what we want. And yeah, don't get it mixed up. Nonviolent action doesn't mean being nice to the fascists. It means being good to each other, to build up our side, to share our strengths and our skills. But we should treat the fascists like the trash they are. Call out their shitty remarks and views. Stop helping them with their rent or food. Block them on social media. Boycott their companies. Fuck up their fast food orders. Cut them out of your will. Stop inviting them to holiday dinners. Or go the opposite way and become so annoying to them that they try to cut you out. Do absolutely anything and everything within your means to make their lives miserable, non-violently. As for me, I'm going to go back to my more science-heavy videos after this, but I'm also going to do my best to help foster community, both in real life and online. With that in mind, I'm committing myself to doing more live streams over on my alt channel where we can hang out, have fun, and build friendships, which you can then carry over to my Patreon or my totally free Discord, where we already have nearly 1,000 like-minded friends. Because I get it. Not everybody can get out there and connect to others in the real world. So don't worry. I'm not going anywhere. We're not going anywhere. We have a lot of work to do. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. If you loved the video, please subscribe. And if you think the world could use more videos like this and you happen to have a few bucks laying around, head to patreon.com/Rebecca and join an awesome community of nerds like the people whose names you see on the screen right now. Thanks.